I gotta say, I'm really glad that we got the recommendation to try a blog and a vlog, a little bit of both. So, what I really wanted to do is see if I could do two blogs, two vlogs, and we'll see how it goes. But I really enjoyed this past week because Dear White People is one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite movies, and I even brought the book to class that I got in DC earlier this year. So it's really cool that we were able to watch it in class and to discuss some of the themes and topics behind it that maybe I didn't catch the first time, or even if I did catch it, just kind of getting a little bit more deeper into it. So, the one thing that I really wanted to talk about was the social media aspect of it and just the way that we use it as student affairs professionals, just as graduate students, as when we were an undergrad, and how the times really change with social media. So, that was one of the ways that I thought about before even going into the episodes. So even like with Grownish, getting to talk about how social media affected all of the students and the outcomes and the repercussions that they had, but even just specifically to Dear White People and some of the ways that power really played into it with Silvio and the alt Ivy and kind of bringing out this population of students that existed before, but maybe didn't have that voice, and then now that Silvio kind of brought them out, they felt empowered, and or how Lionel tells them that the kind of people that you've emboldened in the episode. But kind of bringing it back to class and to Reddick's piece and Reddick's talk, really thinking about my use of social media as a student affairs professional, because for my personal experience, I do have a personal Twitter account and a professional Twitter account. And for me, it's easy to manage both. I've had my personal one for a while, probably between my first and second year of college. And the professional one, I think I've had since maybe my senior year of college. And, at first it was just kind of when I was starting to get more down the road of grad school and seeing what I'm going to use it for. It's really blown up since then in terms of how I use it. Really trying to make sure that my professional one, I usually just talk about sports and things like that, things that I want to talk about with my friends, and then the personal one is what I use that for. And the professional one is just more for work and when I'm at conferences and things like that. But I say all that just because I know how Reddick in the readings was really reinforcing how your professional Twitter, or even it's just if it's one Twitter, whatever you use, whatever kind of social media, is really a way for you to connect with people outside of these ivory tower walls. And for me, that really stood out to me in terms of how can we reach out to people in spaces where we are researching these communities and we are working with these communities, but maybe they don't have the access to some of the articles that we publish, or they don't have that much time to be able to read through an entire book or book chapter, but they can read 140 characters worth of information that we're trying to put out. So that really is something that stuck with me, and I think it's something that can really keep for future reference in terms of when I keep pursuing my career in higher ed, or just a way of how I'll use social media as a professional and how it was different from as a student. And then even 5-10 years from now, there could be a brand new social media that pops out, and as student affairs professionals, and how we're going to leverage that social media to meet the students where they are, and to see how we can connect with them outside of just the classroom or outside of just the face-to-face, but really making sure that we can keep students engaged that way. So with that social media piece, it was just really really important to kind of think about how social media is gonna always be a part of our lives now. I mean, it's just going to be around with students, and even if it's something different, it's just something that we'll have to get used to, especially in this field. But to kind of go back to just Dear White People and some of the ways that the reading was talking about how race has been one of the biggest um, you know, divisive factors in our history, and the way that Beck really talks about race being this biggest divide in America. It really can make you think about how in Dear White People you do see mostly just black students against everyone else, the way that it's pitted on there. We were talking in class in our small groups how there's really only two Latinos, Silvio and Wesley, and then there's one Asian student that we saw in the episodes who was part of the Dear White People. So to me, when I think about it that way, is this really kind of getting at the myth of the model minority, and the way that Asian Americans sometimes are lumped into white Americans when it's convenient for white Americans, but when it's not, Asian Americans can be put back into minority status. It's just one of those things that always kind of pops out in terms of how race is portrayed in Dear White People. But even with one of the episodes that we didn't get to watch in class, but I did the breakout viewing for Dear White People in the first 4 episodes. Now, as I rewatched Reggie's episode, the second episode, which was the second time that I had seen it, one of the things that really stood out to me was the code switching that Troy's dad does when Reggie and Troy are walking down the courtyard, and the dean, Troy's dad, sees who you're supposed to assume is a white professor, and he kind of changes up his voice and changes up his mannerisms, and Reggie kind of calls him out on it and saying like, what was that, or kind of joking about it. But that really kind of gets me thinking about how am I interacting with some of my students of color, or students who I have similar backgrounds to, because I know that there are some students that I'm closer to, maybe because of our shared backgrounds, and we can interact in a certain way, but then I might not be able to interact that same way with faculty or staff, or even students from communities outside of my own. And that's just something that I think is always going to be around with student affairs professionals, especially student affairs professionals of color, or faculty of color. Just the ways that we can interact with one another, it's different from the way that you can interact with white people on campus, or even off campus. So I think that it was really a small piece of Dear White People where they showed that code switching, but I think that it's really important, just for kind of talking about how black people and how, especially like how men of color are supposed to interact, like how Reggie says that he doesn't want to be seen as the angry black man, and he doesn't want to be a stereotype for what's associated with being a man of color, specifically a black man there on that campus. But yeah, even just thinking about going back to Silvio and Wesley, just that lack of Asian and Latino representation. Not so much in Grownish, still a little bit, but you see like Francia Raiza, and you see a couple more characters who are black, or Latino, or just other students of color, which was good to see. But there definitely is that lack of representation in pop culture for higher ed, but even just in general for Hollywood. So I think that kind of gets at the bigger scope of what pop culture can really show. I know that we've had movies, like Get Out and Black Panther, Beatrice at Dinner, the new movie coming out in August, the Crazy Rich Asians, things like that. Those kinds of movies that I think is moving the needle on representation for other people of color. But I know that there's still work to be done there, and since there's work to be done just at the greater level of Hollywood, there definitely is work to be done for pop culture in higher ed as well.